So can lightning strike twice for Neva Studio after their masterpiece GRIS? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Neva is their latest venture. It's published by Devolver Digital and it's promising another emotional journey with stunning visuals and storytelling. But does it live up to the legacy of GRIS or does it fall short? Well, let's dive in and see if Neva stands on its own as another triumph from this acclaimed studio. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, it helps out the channel a huge amount. So let's talk about the story. Neva follows Alba, a young woman bound to a wolf cub after a traumatic encounter with dark forces. Now together, they embark on a dangerous journey through a decaying world. They are trying to restore it. As the cub grows, however, into an imposing adult, their relationship is tested, with the wolf seeking its own identity, and Alba's love and commitment is pushed to the limits. This story is told without words, relying on the emotions and actions of the characters to convey meaning, much like Neva's previous game, GRIS. It is a visually driven, emotionally charged narrative that is definitely open to interpretation. Now personally, I found the story thought-provoking, though I felt the ending wrapped up a little too quickly. Would have liked just a little bit more time at the conclusion to explore the resolution. That said though, look, it's a beautiful, heartfelt experience that definitely left an impression. So if you have played GRIS before, you're going to find a lot of the gameplay mechanics in Neva, they're going to feel familiar. The game places a heavy focus on adventure platforming with a similar flow that's centered around exploration and beautifully crafted environments. However, Neva introduces a significant change, that is combat. Now while GRIS was more about the emotional storytelling through puzzle solving and traversal, Neva just steps up that challenge by adding these combat encounters, and they definitely push the players a bit more. It's never overwhelmingly difficult, but it does demand more, let's say, focus and precision than its predecessor. That said though, like if combat isn't your thing and you are here for the story, do not worry. Neva features 2 difficulty levels. There's the standard adventure mode, which is what I played and what I think most players will experience, as it seems to be how the developers intended the game to be played. But for those who want to focus solely on the story, there's a story mode too. Now this mode, it doesn't remove combat, but it lets you enjoy the narrative without the threat of death and with slightly easier challenges. It's definitely a great addition, making sure that players who are more interested in the journey than the combat can still enjoy the game without frustration. None of this matters though if the controls aren't responsive, and thankfully they are incredible. Now you'll have a few different abilities at your disposal. They tie into both the platforming and the combat, but you've got a double jump, a dash that not only helps with traversal, but also grants you invincibility frames during that combat. There is a single attack button, and then you've also got your wolf companion. Now early on, you'll be looking after them, but as they grow, they gain new abilities. This adds depth to the experience, but some examples, you're going to be able to fire them across the screen to attach to enemies. They'll even fight alongside you. And while this is still tied to that single attack button, it adds some variety. It gives you a lot more strength, but visually looks incredible. You can even actually ride on their back later in the game for faster traversal, which is definitely a fun and useful mechanic to get through what is actually quite a big world. As for the puzzles, then Neva really shines here with some inventive concepts, especially towards the end game. I don't want to spoil it too much, but let's just say they do some impressive things. I'll give one example. It involves a mirrored screen where on your side, you can't see the platforms you need to jump on, but they're visible on the other side of the mirror. You have to use the reflection to navigate the location, and it's such a clever mechanic that keeps you on your toes. Like GRIS, this is a journey you should experience firsthand, so I'm not going into many specifics here, but trust me when I say there's some brilliant design at work here. In terms of the actual core gameplay objectives, then it really has you traveling through different seasons, so winter, spring, summer, fall, and each with its own beautifully crafted environment. Your goal is to light these, let's say, totems, which bring color and life back to the world. It's a world that, as I said, it's been ravaged by an evil spirit. These dark forces, they've killed off much of the surrounding environment, and you'll face off against creepy enemies that remind me a lot of No Face from Spirited Away. These enemies serve as your nemesis throughout the game, and they're just incredibly intimidating, honestly, because they're smart. They can combine to form larger threats. They inhabit other creatures to attack you. They can stretch across the screen. They use the environment to their advantage, think throwing objects in your direction. And they've also just always got a surprise up their sleeve to catch you off guard. Then when it comes to the boss encounters, pushing things even further, really enjoyed them. You'll have to get creative here to stun these enemies before you can land your attacks. It adds a nice layer of strategy. And then, just like GRIS, there are a few chase sequences thrown into the mix as well. Now, I will admit here, some of the chase sequences felt a little bit trial and error. They were fun. So yeah, there was a few moments where I'd say it was tough to anticipate what was coming next. So a few minor kind of frustrating failures. But honestly, the fast-paced nature of these sections for me made up for it. And I don't think they detracted from the overall experience. In fact, I think they did end up elevating it. When it comes to complaints, I think my biggest one would say the game starts off a little bit slow in my opinion. Neva's actually a bit longer than GRIS. It's clocking in at around 5 hours compared to GRIS's, say, 2 to 3 hours. And it takes a bit of time for the gameplay to really ramp up. But that first hour or so is spent establishing the narrative, introducing the mechanics, but it kind of feels a little bit like a slow burn. Once you hit that hour and a half to 2 hour mark, it starts to open up and really shine. But there's definitely kind of that entry barrier at the beginning. What kept me hooked though was how each season introduced something new. So the game's very good at giving you constant new abilities or new concepts, and every new environment just basically brought this new mechanic or new challenge, and it really pushes you to master what you've already learned, while of course keeping the experience fresh. So yeah, you're constantly adapting. I never knew what to expect from this world. It definitely kept things exciting. I just wish it kind of got moving just a tiny bit quicker. Overall though, that's about it really. I have very few complaints about the gameplay. It's as impressive as GRIS, but the introduction of combat adds a nice change of pace. And I think it was a bold move for the team, honestly, to lean into combat this time, but it worked out so well. And yeah, kudos to the developers for taking that risk and, you know, pulling it off. All right, let's talk about the visuals because honestly, just wow. I mean, Neva is absolutely stunning. The game continues the incredible art style that Neva established with GRIS, and years later, it's still just as breathtaking. However, I will say here the visual palette this time around leans much darker, fitting with the more intense themes of the game. But even with this shift in tone, the world just is, I can't think of a better word, but mesmerizing. You know, and whether you're playing docked or on the Switch as well in handheld mode, I think it just looks gorgeous from beginning to end. It's the way they've designed this world traveling through the seasons. They've made it into a spectacle, and the camera movements, it's zooming in and out, it's guiding your perspective, and yeah, you'll frequently find yourself with multiple pathways to explore. It's one of those games very much like GRIS where you could literally take a screenshot of any of these, put it in a frame and hang it on your wall. It is just complete art. Also, even though the game is linear in nature, the pathways that you can follow at times, they definitely give you hints at what might lie ahead in the visuals, and that's really impressive. It adds to that sense of mystery. Then finally, while you're solving puzzles, you know, whether it's moving blocks, pulling switches in different directions, there's always going to be something interesting happening around you. It's not necessarily just a beautiful environment, but you might see enemies stirring in the background. You know, are they going to come onto your plane and start up a battle? It kind of keeps you a little bit on the edge of the seat. But yeah, not a single thing I can complain about visually. From the very first scene to that final cut, it is just visually flawless. Cutscenes are just as impressive as well. They maintain the hand-drawn style, but add all this, they add almost a 3D-like depth in the way the characters are presented. And the close-up shots of the characters, especially during these emotional moments, they really bring a personal kind of emotional charge to the narrative, which is absolutely needed. So yeah, Neva, visual masterpiece from start to finish. All right, let's talk about the audio, and I'll keep it simple. Stunning. The music, it's absolutely beautiful, again following in the footsteps of GRIS with signature piano melodies. However, Neva dials up the intensity, especially during combat encounters. You will definitely notice a more dynamic range in the soundtrack as it mirrors the action on screen. One thing I found particularly interesting is that some of the pieces are a little bit more, let's say, ominous this time around. You know, the music here doesn't just reflect the emotional weight of the story, I think it also serves as a reflection of the world's environment. I don't think GRIS leaned into this quite as much, so it's a nice evolution in their use of music to set the tone. And just so you know as well, GRIS is one of my favorite video game soundtracks. I listen to it very often. And after experiencing Neva, I can confidently say I'll be adding this soundtrack to my rotation as well. And then when it comes to sound effects, I just quickly want to touch on them. Enemies sound suitably threatening. The environment's packed tones that definitely reflect the circumstance, and the combat sounds solid. Neva is a near masterpiece. It offers a stunning world, breathtaking visuals, and a beautifully composed soundtrack. However, to be transparent, this game won't be for everyone, and that's okay. The narrative has a clear structure, but much of it is open to interpretation. I know not everyone likes that, but it's what Nomada Studio excels at. They craft experiences that invite players to take their own meaning from the story, and I think that's what makes their work so special. That said though, I do think the game starts a little slow and then wraps up a bit too quickly at the very end, which for me affected the pacing of both the story and the gameplay. And while it is a longer experience than GRIS, I feel they actually could have tightened up the early sections, maybe sacrificed that and spent a little bit more time developing the conclusion, and that balance then would have made the game in my eyes just perfect. But honestly, look, I don't think you're going to regret playing Neva, and once again the studio has shown why they're just so unique and so important to the world of gaming. So today it's an amazing 9 out of 10 from me. Definitely check it out. Definitely at least add it to the wish list because it's one you want to keep on your radar. So let me know what you think of this one in the comments. If you did enjoy the video as well, make sure to subscribe for daily Switch content, and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers all.